At the time of me recording this, America and Israel had kicked off a war in the Middle East. Iran, Lebanon, Israel, United States, all at war with each other. Now, if you're an ex-Jehovah's Witness, you might be thinking, what if they're right? What if the Jehovah's Witnesses were correct? What if this is Armageddon? Now, plenty of people rush back to the organization in situations like this. I remember when I was younger, when 9/11 happened, and all of a sudden my brother started attending meetings again, even though he hadn't attended for years. And then when it turned out Armageddon wasn't coming, he stopped attending again. When world events happen that seem to back up the narrative that the Jehovah's Witnesses have about the last days, it can be quite triggering, and lots of people feel anxiety and rush back to what they know, rush back to what they feel safe with, which was the Jehovah's Witness organization. Maybe you're feeling the same way. Maybe you've been out weeks, months, years, even decades. Some of the indoctrination can be that strong that when a world event happens, when a war happens, a terrible storm, a natural disaster, it can trigger that anxiety and make you reconsider and make you think to yourself, is this Armageddon? Were the Jehovah's Witnesses correct? Well, first of all, let me reassure you that this has a name. It's called religious trauma syndrome. It's actually an offshoot of post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, religious trauma syndrome is very common for people who grew up in fundamentalist groups, particularly ones with end times paranoia, with end times prophecies. It's the same part of the brain that is activated when people who've experienced child abuse, people who've been in abusive relationships, their nervous system is calibrated, as yours and mine will have been when we were Jehovah's Witnesses, calibrated to constantly be on edge, constantly awaiting Armageddon. So when something like that happens, our nervous system naturally kicks in, and our brain produces all those anxiety-producing chemicals and makes us seek safety and reassurance. And for many people, they think that safety and reassurance is found in the Jehovah's Witness organization because that's all they've known. First thing you need to understand is that you're reacting that way because your nervous system has been calibrated to react that way. Secondly, there's also the issue of cognitive bias. The way we think, the way we look at the world, the way we interpret world events. When we were Jehovah's Witnesses, was trained to interpret world events a certain way. We were trained to look at non-members as worldly. We were trained to think that all apostates were malicious in their intent. Especially if we were raised in the religion, that thought process can be very difficult to untangle. So when we see world events happen like wars, famine, natural disasters, our cognitive bias can kick in, the old way of thinking that we were trained to have. So when we see a war, rather than looking at it logically and telling ourselves that wars are common, wars have always happened throughout human history, our cognitive bias tells us that this one is special somehow, that we've never had it like this, which is what Jehovah's Witnesses will tell you. That is a cognitive bias. World events are interpreted in a way to back up their claim, to back up the Jehovah's Witness narrative. Because you'll notice when things get better, Jehovah's Witnesses will also say, oh, well, this is also prophesied that things will get better before they get worse. So what can you do about it? Well, if you find yourself triggered by world events and you feel anxiety, even though logically you know it isn't true, what can you do? Well, there are certain steps you can take to recalibrate your nervous system and recalibrate your cognitive bias. The first thing to do, if you've had a triggering event, if you're feeling anxious, in the moment, it's very, very important to take yourself out of that catastrophizing thinking, look around the room and count 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can smell, 2 things you can touch, and 1 thing you can taste. This brings your awareness to the present moment. That's the first step, because when you're in the present moment, then you can think clearly. When you're in the present moment, when you're thinking clearly, now you need to think about the situation logically. Convince yourself that what is happening is not the fulfillment of any kind of prophecy. Get a piece of paper and a pen, or a notebook and a pen, and research yourself very quickly on your phone or on a computer. Look at how frequent earthquakes are anyway, before Jehovah's Witnesses spoken about it. Look at how we've always had wars, we've always had food shortages. In fact, we have less wars and less food shortages today than we ever have in human history. But don't just take my word for it. Go and find that information yourself and write that down to reassure you. And maybe even carry that around with you in your pockets, wherever. If you feel triggered again, you can get that out and reassure yourself. And the final thing you should do is reclaim the narrative. So the narrative that you've been given when you were Jehovah's Witness, and I say given because you didn't come to that conclusion on your own, the analysis that you were given is that the world is bad, the world is evil, the world's getting worse, and everything that happens just so coincidentally is interpreted by Jehovah's Witnesses as backing up what they've said, which isn't true. So reclaim the narrative. Acknowledge to yourself that this anxiety, this trauma that you're feeling is a result of religious indoctrination and religious trauma. Now, if you're PMO, if you're physically in the congregation but mentally out of it, or if you can think back to your Jehovah's Witness days, you'll most likely remember that there is a high number of people in the congregations who suffer with mental illness on some level, whether that be depression or psychosis. And the reason for that is because not only does the organization attract people who are looking for answers and attract people who are already hypervigilant, but it also, once the people are in, even if they're not mentally ill, it creates mental illness, it creates hypervigilance, it creates cognitive bias, and it calibrates their nervous system to constantly be on edge and constantly feel anxious. So I hope this video helps. I hope if you're struggling with religious trauma syndrome or anxiety or triggering event due to whatever world event is happening at the time you're watching this video, try some of the methods that I've described there. If you're still feeling stuck, if you need more help or advice, check out my website, exJWrecovery.com. I answer every email that gets sent to me. I'm here to help as a psychologist and former member. Also, check out my Patreon if you want to support me on my work and help support your mental health without paying thousands and thousands of pounds. Thank you.